Hey, welcome back to MobilityWOD. We're talking about the CrossFit Games Open WOD workout 12.4. Now, big work block in the morning, in the first part of this, of wall balls, some little placeholder double unders, which are basically designed to smoke your shoulders and make the muscle up kind of part of this more difficult. Now look, the first aspect of this is, it's going to be, one, do you have double unders or muscle ups? Yes, no. What we're going to find is that everyone's going to get through these kind of easy work blocks in 12 minutes, and then they're going to get to the muscle ups and struggle. If you have muscle ups, then the real key of this workout is how much energy and efficiency can I carry into that muscle up portion. The average person is going to probably have 5 minutes, maybe 4 to 6 minutes of work in there, and what we're going to find is that if your technique isn't very efficient, then you're going to struggle with this because you're going to be very pre-fatigued. Definitely check out Carl Powley's video from gymnasticswod.com. The link is on the bottom of this, after this. He's got some great technique tips about getting warmed up, being efficient. But what we're going to talk about today is really how do we get you to be very, very efficient and very miserly with your shoulders. What ends up happening is that if I'm inefficient on some of these kind of the wall ball type positions, then shoulders are forward, my upper traps are smoked, my triceps are a little bit blown out, and it turns out that I'm not going to quite have that pop. The other thing we've seen is that last year we had to do a bunch of burpees over the bar, overhead squats, and then muscle ups, and the same thing happened, that big anterior chain kind of exposure smoking you, and then what we found is that a lot of people had a difficult time, one, stabilizing the shoulder. Hey, that sounds familiar. Couldn't connect, and then second, couldn't achieve good hip extension to get my hip high to the bar so I could kind of get into transition. Why? Because I was already smoked. So here's what we're going to think. The first piece on the wall balls is we're going to talk about some efficiency here. Now, what I want you to be thinking about in the wall balls is if you are struggling for position, if your feet are turned out, then it's going to be a lower torque environment, which means it's going to be harder to keep my torso upright. Remember, keeping the feet straight-ish between 5 and 12 degrees allows me to create enough torque where I can really shove my knees out. If you watch the WOD demo with Graham Holmberg, you'll notice that his knees don't wobble. They go out and stay out the entire time. Now look at this in terms of efficiency. I just have to get hip crease below the knee. And so what I want to have is a strong bottom position that encounters and encompasses all of my systems. It's a capsular system, adductors are tight, hamstrings are tight. And what I want to do is try to save my quads and save my anterior chain musculature for the muscle up portion of this. So what I want to try to do is turn this very upright torso dominant movement of wall balls into as much posterior chain as I can. If I'm just loading up my hips and hamstrings, torso is going to come forward, that's going to be a problem. So we solve that problem by shoving knees out. So we look at what are the two positions I need to prep for most efficiently. Getting ankles open, and if you're missing ankle flexibility, you know who you are, consider doing this workout in your Olympic lifting shoes, particularly if you don't have a double under problem. If you're going to not be able to double under your Olympic lifting shoes, probably skip it, but I would definitely consider doing this with my Olympic lifting shoes, allow for a little bit more torso upright, knees out, which makes this very efficient. For every inch that shoulder torso comes forward in the bottom of the wall ball, I'm going to have to throw my head back to look up with the target, which means that my shoulders destabilize more. I end up smoking my shoulders receiving the ball in this position versus receiving the ball in this position. If I hand a wall ball to anyone and say, stand here with it, everyone will put their shoulders back, they'll keep the wall ball at their neck, head neutral, and then what we wouldn't ever say is lean forward and round, but this is exactly where people will receive the ball. So in order to keep the torso upright, I'm thinking knees out in the bottom. I don't have to go to full depth on this thing, so my stance can be a little bit wider, which allows me to kind of encompass this bottom position and have a place to rebound so that it really feels like it's my hips and hamstrings. If I'm narrow and I have to look for that tension, I have to go a lot deeper before I find that, which means I'm going to live off my quads instead of the hip capsule, the adductors, the glutes, things like that. So toy with your stance so it's easy to get just hip crease below the knee. You're in a strong bottom position. Note down here, if you turn your feet out, it becomes a lot softer. This is one of the reasons I want you to try to have the foot straighter in this bottom position. It's going to allow for a more upright torso, more upright finishing position. Second idea, keeping the head as neutral as possible. If you crank and then receive, then what's going to happen is that loss of head position lets the shoulders come in. Then I'm just putting myself into a big upper back smoke, traps are tight, shoulders are getting cooked. So I'm going to try to wall ball, looking up at the target, trying to keep the hands up in this position, and then when I receive the ball, head comes immediately back. Less important here, definitely make sure where we are, but as I come back, head is just neutral, looking up at the target. That allows for a really upright torso in this bottom position, which means I can keep my shoulders back and lats on in this bottom. This is going to be a very efficient position to hang out. The more you start to incline forward, because your toes are turned out and your knees come in, you're going to lean forward, shoulders are going to take the brunt of this, and you're going to need them. Okay, so wall ball ideas, being efficient, trying to keep the torso as upright as possible. So if I'm prepping for that, obviously, I'm thinking this is position number 2. Am I having a hard time getting my arms up and receiving this position? We think basic strategies of doing things like prepping, external rotation, arm overhead. Basic strategies like getting on the tube and working on my thoracic extension. And this is going to be particularly important that I get into some good thoracic extension, because what we find is that after a repeated episode where I'm receiving here, if I'm flexed or tired, it makes it really difficult to pull over on the muscle up. The difference of being kind of forward and internally rotated versus into extension makes a big difference in terms of my transition. So that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about getting prepped in the bottom position here. Make sure ankles are open so I'm up and set. Now, double unders. A lot of people are smoking on this, but I want to be efficient. So make sure I enter the tunnel organized, externally rotate stable, and this is going to park my shoulders. If you're double undering in that forward shoulder position because you're piking and it's comfortable, that's going to be expensive later on. So making sure that I'm saving my shoulders for the big finale, which is about muscle up. So here's the deal. A couple things we're thinking about the muscle up in terms of prep. One, we said that we know this is going to be anterior dominant movement. So I'm prepping, one, for the wall ball by making sure my quads are open. I'm definitely going to do some anterior chain flossing, where I'm basically going to take that band, work it around, and I really want to make sure that I'm really open in the front of the hip here. As I get tired from wall ball and have a hard time reaching extension, this is where it's going to fatigue out. It's going to be difficult to get into transition if I can't get the hip high. So make sure that you've opened up that anterior chain on the muscle ups. The second thing I'm really thinking about is kind of thinking about the rotational components. Now, we've talked about a lot in the past that if I'm missing internal rotation, I'm going to compensate. What we'll see is that you're probably, if you're this guy missing internal rotation, shoulders forward, that's your wall ball position. You might be able to do muscle ups, but you probably won't be able to do them if you're a little bit smoked and you're in a bad position. So definitely working on the extension. Now, if you're thinking about extension here, one of the big concepts is to make sure that I can receive that muscle up in a really low position, but stable position, not low and forward. So I'm going to definitely work on some extension. Shoulders behind back, trying to get my hands together. This looks like basic skin to cat kinds of things where I'm working on being able to get the elbow into full extension so it's less energy to get to here, right? That's one idea. Second idea, of course, is to do any internal rotation prep that you feel like, just to make sure that you've got the shoulders back. You're working on being able to kind of unglue the front of the shoulders. Other thing is that I see that we're going to end up being really fatigued, and I need to be able to generate a lot of torque in this position. Many of you guys are still feeling very cooked in the triceps from the last big competition, so here's what we're going to add for that. I stick my elbow through, I'm going to externally rotate, and then I'm going to keep that out, and instead of just hanging forward, I'm going to start straightening my arm out. So I'm going to drop down, rib cage down, and I'm just going to keep dropping the arm down. This forces the external rotation of the arm in this basically high lat, high tight position. If I don't have access to a band, I can do the same thing on a bar. I just slide my hands down, but working in this corner really is going to exaggerate the external rotation in this top position, which is where I'm going to have to pull to create the stable shoulder. If I can't create that external rotation torque, I'm going to pull in this position, shoulder comes forward, really difficult to transition as I'm tired. So I need to be able to open up, make sure that I'm clean on that muscle up, pulling into that position. This is going to be a test of the efficiency of your mechanics, keeping the torso upright, being relaxed so that you have enough energy in the shoulders and in the triceps. Some of my friends are talking about being really cooked here. Definitely smash those things. If you're not efficient catching here or receiving here, that's going to be tricky. I would definitely say today, if you've got a voodoo floss band, floss it if you got it. I want to wrap the triceps and unglue all that mess with the Voodoo Floss band. And absolutely, part of my warm-up strategy is going to be to Voodoo Floss my quads, especially after that last heavy-duty workout we did last week. So let's make sure that we're opening it up. Quads, big time. That's going to be the limiter in terms of getting to hip extension and then working on those corners. The more efficient you are on wall balls, that's 6 minutes, that's the big episode, the more energy you're going to carry into this final workout. Take a look at Carl's prep on muscle ups. It's the best. Good luck. We'll see you guys tomorrow.